Yes.
Aye.
Let me go ahead and pull that up. You guys see the agenda yet? There's the agenda.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes, Sandra.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Who
Are
was
there
that?
any
Who was that seconded?
Tim
that
Darcy.
approved,
Oh, okay.
moved and seconded? Are there any additions, deletions, or changes? And all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Are there any nays? Then we've just approved the February 9th minutes.
Yay.
We're on to the solid waste recommendations on the agenda.
There were three action items for this week. Pete, do you want to talk about the lead certification information? Or maybe not.
Would someone like to talk about the lead certification information?
I did a little bit of research on it. Let me get down here.
I'm sorry, ma'am. I was actually muted. So
Were you talking?
I was talking and I was muted. So
I thought maybe you were on a call.
now, if you can pull up the presentation again, the lead slide.
Is it not up?
No, we just have the agenda.
All right. Let's try this little thing again here. Sorry. There it is. Do you guys see it?
Yeah.
Oh, good. It's little. I'm going to make it bigger for you. Maybe.
And if you can go up 2 slides from there.
There.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about the lead certification and trying to get a little bit more information on it. And, you know, as we've kind of dug into it a little bit, the lead certification it's a very broad topic, and it goes into not only waste and construction and demolition, but it gets into efficiency, sustainability, even how much waste that you would generate on a weekly basis, just a whole lot of different stuff. If you can go to the next slide. So you can kind of see that a lot of the information that we found goes with the U.S. Green Building Council or the U.S. GBC and how they classify things. They give scores, and you've got the basic, platinum, gold, and silver, and basic, and depends upon how you do. So the A lot of it has to do with diverting your C and D from the landfills and incineration facilities. So you can kind of see on the slide there how they score. So you're going to get 1 point if you get 50% of the non-hazardous C and D waste is recycled. Generally, that's pretty easy to do. If it's dependent upon the type of construction that it is, if it's concrete, it's pretty easy. If it's a house, it's a little bit more difficult. But you're talking about shingles, some wood, some metal, and things like that. You get 2 points if you can get 75%. Little bit harder to do when it comes to a single family residential property. But sometimes it's actually easy for some industrial kind of buildings. If you think of everybody remembers the silos that was there by 65 for the longest of time. Those silos were almost all concrete, and almost all of that material was recycled. I mean, the building was metal and concrete for the most part. So that was an easy one to do. They do not allow you to use excavated soil. They don't allow alternative daily cover to be used as a diversion, which I think is significant when it comes to sometimes mixed C and D. Then you get the 2
Could you,
point
for
forward.
those of us who are not knowledgeable, could you tell us what alternate daily cover is?
Okay, sorry about that. Alternative daily cover, when you put your waste on, you bring your waste in all day into a landfill, and at the end of the day, it has to be covered. This is for a lot of different reasons: vectors, birds, and fire, and all kind of different reasons. So it has to be covered at the end of the day. Alternative daily cover is something that's not dirt. So it's kind of like a shredder fluff from the shredding of cars in like River Metals does. They shred cars. It's full of little pieces and parts that aren't metal.
Through on my computer and my email.
And that is
Popped up on my computer monitor.
not sure what's going on. So that alternative daily cover is something that's used instead of, as an alternative of using normal cover dirt. So that's one of those things. So to get back onto the LEED certification, they'll give also 2 points for reducing total waste generation. So that means if you have in general less waste overall, as far as a 2.5 pounds per square foot, then you can get some points there as well. So when we look at this in relation to a solid waste management C and D processing ordinance, which is basically mixed C and D, I'm not really sure that it really helps us as much as what we had first thought. It may in something that I don't know as far as informational goes, but I think that the biggest point here that we have is that we want to look at this as though for people that are doing that construction and demolition, is that we have an outlet developed for that mixed C and D as much as anything else. You know, a lot of it will come out, you know, the concrete that comes out, and that's already being done. The metal is generally already being done and separated because there's it's kind of an easier thing to do. But when you get down to that mixed C and D, and Diane, do we have the slide that shows what was in the mixed C and D in the study? I think we talked about it the other day. Give me just a moment. I'll be able to get to what I need to get to here in just a second. Well, telling you I cannot pull up the study. Try it a different way.
I've been talking. Karen, did we have that on the last? Where did we have that?
don't know.
Thought we had it on PowerPoint somewhere, like we just did.
Pete had made a PowerPoint about CD last year. It might be on that one. I have that PowerPoint pulled up if you want me to share that.
Yeah, that would be great, Karen.
Do you all see this? Is this what you're thinking about, Pete?
Yes. So if you can make that a little bit bigger, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And go up one more slide. Yeah, Earth, this is what I need. Okay, so when we talk about what we need for this mixed C and D processing ordinance, this is the material that was looked at and what was in there. You can see here that the treated, painted, processed wood was probably the biggest constituent, which is not really recoverable. The roofing material is recoverable. The untreated, unpainted lumber is recoverable. The engineered wood is not. The concrete, brick, stone, and tile is. Gypsum board could be. Pallets and crates are recoverable. The clean gypsum board is recoverable if you have the outlets, and then your corrugated cardboard and the mixed MSW is not. So, or the corrugated cardboard is recoverable, and the MSW is not. So, as you can see, when they start talking about a C&D processing ordinance, this is the material that they're talking about recovering. And if you go to the next slide, Karen, I think what you will see. No, what you can see here is that 52% of that material that's currently in that C&D stream that is going to landfills is recoverable. So that's what they wanted us to kind of make this C&D processing ordinance about. So where do we go? Go to the next slide, please.
Can I ask you a question on that slide first? Thank you. Why is curbside recyclable C&D material?
Because it's in this, it was contained within the C&D load. In other words, you have a dumpster that's on site and people are putting in normal recyclable items. So could be from lunches, it could be from,
Okay,
yeah, so it's
I
not.
understand.
Okay.
Because the compostable yard waste, I didn't understand that one either.
Yeah, it's whatever's thrown into the dumpster. So it comes in these mixed loads. So go ahead and go, Karen. So when we talk about what we have here, which is another thing that you guys kind of wanted us to look at, is what do we have as far as facilities that can process this stuff? Obviously, we have plenty of scrap metal processors. We actually have 10 of those in town. We have one concrete and brick and asphalt recycler. We have 2 shingle recyclers, although I think that's going to be 1. We have 5 pallet recyclers, and we have 2 that accept mixed inert material. And that is more beneficial use, like filling holes or something like that. And that's a huge number. We have that now. So what are we missing? When we go back up to the products, if you could, Karen. When you go back up here, what are we missing to make all this work? Is we really need kind of the gypsum board. And that's pretty much it. That's a product that we would need. Now there are other materials like ceiling tiles that can be recovered, carpet that sometimes comes out of construction demolition that could be recovered, and those types of things. So there are other opportunities, but for a big part of this, really, and what we need here is that a few more. I'm sorry. A few more outlets, and I think that we would have everything covered. The only thing that we don't have is the processing capabilities. And that is where that ordinance kind of comes in and why that recommendation the way it was. If we have a facility that could process these materials here, we mostly have outlets for it now. And it would actually help businesses in their ability to certify as LEED and to get their points without, I mean, if it comes in a mixed load, we'd have no way to recover this stuff. If we have a processing facility that can process this material, then we have mostly the markets out there locally that we can use to do it. Going to the next slide, Karen, and the next slide after that. Some of the advantages to these things is obviously if we do have a C&D processing ordinance, then it's going to create jobs. It's going to create business opportunities. It will actually help with architectural salvage, is what they say. It's going to save natural resources. It's going to help businesses meet LEED standards. It's going to have some avoided landfill disposal. And it will have some economic benefits as well. So that was basically, I think, what the task was, is to kind of see what we have here, what the types of materials that we're looking for, and the reason that we would want to consider going to a C&D processing ordinance. I think it initially, a lot of people had that we're going to require a new huge hierarchy of things. I don't think that that's what it was, but it was really kind of targeted towards this material that's currently going to the landfill, and just ensuring that it gets processed so that we have that recovery. Any questions?
When you talk about a processing facility, are we talking about a building? Are we talking about the need to acquire land? I don't have any perspective. An ordinance, I was a lawyer, an ordinance is just a piece of paper. It's what the paper says that's important. And while I agree with, obviously, with everything you said, I don't know the implications of them or the magnitude of the implications.
Right. So what does C&D processing look like? We actually sent some material with you as far as for the meeting to kind of give a background as to what C&D recycling is all about. It was a pretty long read, and it can be as basic as you drop the stuff on the floor and doing a hand sort, which, you know, for what had been done locally, that's basically how it was done. It doesn't have to be in a building. You know, it obviously it's going to require some land and preferably on a hard surface. But it's basic. It can be as basic as a hand sort, and it can be as complicated as a material recovery facility such as West Rock, just for construction and demolition material. So the implications of it is that you have to have somebody that's willing to build, but there's nobody willing to take on a business opportunity unless number one, they're going to have enough material for it. And how do you guarantee that material? There is the battle between low landfill costs versus the price of processing this material, whether even if it's a hand sort or what. How much does it cost versus how much value there is in those materials to offset some of those costs? So it's basically it comes down to a business model. And, you know, I think it's probably fairly close. I think in the study, they mentioned that a processing facility per ton was averaging in that $30 to $35 a ton range. And landfill cost was a little bit lower than that. And that was part of the issue. So then we get into that cost versus benefit that we have to figure out. So I don't know that I can answer your question as to what it's going to cost. I think that we would need somebody to tell us a little bit more about the values of these materials versus how much it would cost them to process it. I think that's kind of where we have to move next, is to find those things out.
Where would the money for the facility come from?
Well, obviously, somebody is going to have to make an investment in that. I don't think that it would be government's role to do that. So there has to be that's what it comes down to, that business model. Somebody feel like that they can do that? Yeah, they're willing to put their money up to build whatever it is, versus the recovery that they believe that they can get versus the value of the materials that they're collecting. probably no different than what Westrock does. And that they have all these materials coming in. They've made a significant investment, but they've done that based upon their calculations of, well, we can sell this material for this much. It costs us this much to process it, and we have a viable business.
Thank you.
Any for someone to start a facility like this, Pete?
Say again?
Are there any incentives for someone to, now they want to build a facility like this, thinking about?
Well, there's always economic incentives to businesses if they're a certain size or whatever. And that would have to be worked on through economic development to assist somebody. It could be finding the right piece of property, from finding the right piece of property that's centrally located where a lot of material is generated, so that you have lower transportation costs. It could be how many employees that you're going to have over the years, whether or not that you have tax incentives to be placed on that. So there's, I know enough about economic development to know that, if somebody has an idea, I think anybody would want a business to start up that's going to create jobs in the community. So I don't know. It depends upon the business model again.
Are there any other questions?
I do have an overall question, Madam Chair. We talk about C&D recycling, and I've asked Brian Slade to join our meeting today because there was some recent information that came out from the federal government about counting construction demo as recycling. I think you referred to it as divertible material in your slideshow, which fits, I believe. With regard to recycling, I think there was some guidance that came out. Brian, are you on? Would you be able to help walk us through that? I think you may be muted if you are on.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Brian, you may want to unmute yourself.
Better?
There we go.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Thanks for joining us, Brian.
That's all right. Pete, do we use the EPA definitions in terms of the foundation for our recycling statistics?
We use a municipality's guide to calculating that, yes, which is a publication of the EPA, yes. I'm not real sure which publication or which version you're talking about.
Well, if I understand this right, and I'll send you a copy of it to read, the EPA recently published a national overview, facts and figures on materials waste and recycling. Mm-hmm. And what this says in terms of the definition of MSW, municipal solid waste, is this. The EPA refers to trash, or MSW, as various items consumers throw away after they are used. These items include bottles, corrugated boxes, food, grass clippings, sofas, computers, tires, and refrigerators. However, MSW does not include everything that may be landfilled at the local level, such as construction and demolition, C&D debris, municipal wastewater sludge, and other non-hazardous industrial materials. So the only reason I bring that up, if we're going to be consistent with the national percentages, it appears to me that that is not part of the analysis.
No,
I'll send that to you.
Sure, I've seen them before. They, I look at them periodically. I hadn't seen the latest ones, but C&D has never really been a part of what, and this is kind of the reason that we track our diversion the way that we do. We have curbside rate, we have a residential commercial rate, and then we have an overall rate. And the overall rate includes C&D. So that's kind of why we track them the way we do. The annual report, the state annual report does require us or ask us to report on items that would not be considered municipal solid waste and would be considered construction and demolition waste, such as sewer sludge. So I guess I'm not understanding what the concern is. We obviously, if we want to stay away from C&D and feel like that it's not our purview, I don't know if that's where you're going with it. I think that landfill diversion is something that we want. Our goal is to make the landfill last as long as we can. So maybe I'm not understanding.
Well, my thought was be twofold. We're talking about the material here, and I think it should be classified as divertible rather than recyclable. But at the last meeting we talked, at the 109 board, I believe, maybe we talked about should we count the volume in the Ralph Avenue as recycling? And I think this would strongly suggest we do not, because that is strictly C&D material, as I understand, and it's basically being beneficially reused rather than recycled. So I know I may be splitting hairs, but Brian had sent me that recent publication, and I just wanted him to explain it and just make sure we're consistent with the Fed's perspective on it.
Yeah.
Pete asked a really, really good question. You know, what does that mean? The question would be, what goes into the numbers that we use for the goal that we present to the public and that is in the plan? Does it include C&D or not? Because the EPA does not include it in their statistics. And my question was, do we? I don't know the answer to that. So I'm just asking based on my reading, you know, because I actually did not know that. I have to be honest. But I read it in the most recent report, and that's going on right now. There's an evaluation that the EPA is going through right now, and we're active in that from our lobbyist perspective, and they have been sending us those documents. So as I read that, I thought, what goes into our numbers? So is it consistent with every other community that's measuring diversion and recycling rates?
Well, the first thing I would tell you is that, and I've said this on many different occasions, you can't compare our diversion rates to another city's diversion rates because there isn't a national way that you have to calculate diversion. You can't compare it because somebody might have incineration, somebody might not, somebody might have more waste to energy. So that's an issue that the recycling partnership has been discussing with their municipal waste information that comes in. We participate in that. And one of the goals is to have a national framework for calculating diversion. There isn't. We calculate it many different ways. The waste district traditionally calculated this as simply curbside and commercial recycling. That's the way it used to do it, and we still do that. That is the residential commercial rate that I mentioned. There was an article where somebody was doing that, where they was comparing Louisville to other cities that had a much higher rate. And so that's when they added the C&D processing facility, C&D to that equation, so that article made it at least a little bit more comparable. So that was, this whole debate's been going on since the 90s as far as what is calculated. So we calculate it multiple ways. C and D is a part of that in the overall rate. Residential, commercial, it's just the normal recycling. And then the curbside just tells us how we're doing curbside without any of the drop-offs or anything like that.
So we have two measurements, a diversion rate and a recycling rate.
Yes, exactly. We do. And, you know, when you talk about beneficial use and that being diversion, it's always been like you said, splitting hairs. It's not splitting hairs. It's important to make that distinction. Beneficial use is not recycling. So we do call it in some of our charts, most of our charts and tables, we call it a recycling / diversion rate when we talk about the overall rate.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to get us sidetracked. I just wanted to bring that up initially, and this we can keep it in mind.
I think it's a really good, you know, I think it's important that people kind of understand those distinctions. So I appreciate you bringing it up.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That was very illustrative. Was there anything more you wanted to say on the subject, Pete?
Well, I hope that I give the information that the committee was requesting. And, you know, my request after that is what is the committee's next steps and where do we want to go? Do we want to consider moving forward with a C&D processing ordinance for those materials? Do we understand a little bit better about the scope of what would be in that ordinance? I hope I've explained that fairly well.
I guess I don't understand how the ordinance causes a facility to come into being.
Well, it's that line between what, you know, we get into a facility is not going to locate here if it cannot have, number one, a guaranteed incoming stream of material to process. They're not going to take a chance on that. And or that it is a huge difference between the cost of doing that versus disposal. So in essence, a C&D ordinance would make more of a guarantee that that material has to be processed. And so a facility would be more likely to locate here.
One of the things we spent a lot of time on before the committees were merged, in the committee I was on, was talking about bringing in stakeholders, people with knowledge in the field. And it almost sounds like it would be helpful to us to have some people who would be impacted by an ordinance come and tell us what their impact would be.
I would agree with that. I would also think that we would want to include people that could benefit from it as well.
That sounds excellent. Do we have access to that type of person, company?
You know, we might be able to find somebody that's interested in locating to this market, or somebody in this market that would be interested in it. I know that we've had there's still some people in town that have tried to make this work before. But they certainly saw the benefit. That's why they tried it the first time. So maybe they can see it, you know. Plus, we also have to balance this with diversion and the waste district's goal of trying to divert material from the landfill. Obviously, if there's an increased cost, we're basically buying that diversion, in essence. So that's that pain point that we have to decide. What's it going to cost us versus the amount of diversion that we can get from this.
So it would also be beneficial if you could find some of the people you've been talking about, but if we could also have some people who would generate the waste that we're talking about and what the implications would be on their business.
Yeah, and we do have some of the expertise on the committee that can kind of speak to cost. If the material is being put into a dumpster off the bat, it's already being put into a mixed load. Really, the impact on that generator would be minimal because they don't have to do anything else. I mean, they're not changing anything. They're still putting it into a dumpster the same way that they would be doing before or after that ordinance is created. The difference would be in that what is the cost difference between the landfilling versus processing? That is the ultimate test here. And how much we're willing to do that, how much we're willing to have that pain to do that. So the people that are going to be impacted, I'm not sure who those would be, because we're not asking business to change anything. We're just asking for those mixed loads that they're already creating to go someplace else.
Well, I think you're going to have an increased cost on one end or the other, whether we do source separated or mixed loads. And I think we're blessed that we have people like Matt Smith, locally, Adam with his company, as well as Christiani over in Indiana, processes a lot of wood. And I think there's opportunities that we can draw from within, as well as get the subject matter experts or the impacted parties in from outside with regard to the GCs and whatnot. Because one way or another, somebody's going to pay more, whether it's the processor or whether it's the builder. And in looking at your draft ordinance, I think it would be my recommendation that the group kind of look at it and digest it a bit before we try to move forward on it. Madam Chair, that would be my opinion, but I'm only one. So.
No, I appreciate what you said, because I looked at that, and again, I go back to what I said. An ordinance is a piece of paper. If the infrastructure is not in place to make the ordinance successful, there's no value to it. And it doesn't sound to me, and certainly this is not my area of expertise, but it does not sound to me like right now enough of the infrastructure has been revealed that would allow us to go forward with the ordinance. I agree that we do have some real talent, and maybe our next meeting should focus on having some of these folks talk to us about this will do to their businesses, what impact it would have.
I know I've spoken with Matt Smith with regard to gypsum processing, and he's looked at the science. He says it doesn't need to be done indoors because it is an odorous process. But I know he's got a lot of good information on that, Pete, and Matt's very smart. I respect his background and knowledge. So we should talk to him a bit more about that. And then the practicality of sorting wood, gypsum, and shingles out of a box. That's something that Adam, Matt, and possibly someone from Dan Christiani's company could speak to, because we know Dan takes all wood products, better part to make mulch and whatnot. But Matt obviously does a lot the same. He bags and sells mulch. But this gypsum, what he did with organics in the past, I think he would be a great subject matter expert for us.
Right. So if we could, can you guys help me identify the stakeholders here and who we need to be asking? I think I have that the end users, such as Matt Smith's group and Dan Christiani, I think I understand those. Obviously, we already have the haulers input. Who else do I need as a stakeholder?
Well, I think we have some fairly large construction companies in town, like a Litchfield, or help me out, Brian. There's several in town.
Hall? Would
Yes,
Hall?
that would be one. Can't think of the company. I know where their office is. I can't think of their name.
As long as I have the general category, we can find them.
Okay.
So we can do that.
Because with GC, they're going to have to look at space availability on their construction site, as well as, is it practical? Is it a request?
Just remember that this is loads that are already existing, that are already mixed. So they don't really have to, any separation that they're already doing, they're already doing. This is only looking at loads that are already being generated. So it's not really asking them to do or make any additional space. It's just saying that one particular load that they're already generating would go to a processing facility rather than them having to separate it. In fact, I would think if I'm a general contractor and I'm trying to sell LEED certification, the one box that really bothers me the most is that mixed load where I can't separate the stuff. It's mixed. That now, as a general contractor and trying to sell LEED, that I can say, I now have an outlet for my mixed loads to get them processed. So that's going to help me achieve LEED.
Unfortunately, on LEED, do we not have to report by commodity type the amount of material that was recovered?
Well, what I've seen there is that in other places, and I can't recall where, but you would, and I remember this with Green City, and I don't know if any of you guys remember Green City down on Beach Street. They would give you a estimate of the materials that was recovered from your incoming waste stream. And that was how they was able to utilize that information for LEED. And I know that when Green City actually left, there was a hole as somebody that could do some of that locally. That's what we're talking about. So I would like to hear from the general contractors because I honestly would hope that what I hear, unless I'm missing something, that they would be all for the fact that now they have another outlet for material that can help them sell LEED certification.
Pete, we're doing a number of LEED certifications right now. And based on the platinum, gold, and silver requirements, we have to have a separate dumpster for each material. And so we have 5 or 6 dumpsters on each site where a LEED project is taking place. And we actually quantify and weigh those materials each load and give them an accounting of that so they can determine if it's 1 or 2 points that they'll get inside their LEED certification. So we don't have mixed loads. We do have a trash load, but the other loads, the metals, the C&D, the cardboard, packaging, those kinds of things are all in separate dumpsters.
So what is in the trash load?
It would be anything that did not qualify to be recycled.
So I think that part of those trash loads could be what could have been measured in that was going to the landfill that could have still been classified as C and D. Depending, I don't know. It's a good question. Is that something that you can kind of take a look at and see when you're pulling loads from sites like that? To kind of take a look at what's in those dumpsters?
Yeah, sure. We have a single person assigned to that, and I'll ask him to take a look at that.
Yes, and the process that you're talking about, as far as having all the different containers for the different materials, I think that we're not talking about taking away from that. In fact, I think that that's anytime that you can deconstruct it and put it in those dumpsters is better. But we all know that those mixed loads in certain situations are inevitable.
And I'll tell you where mixed loads would be an advantage is space. I will say if there was someone that was willing to spend the capital because they thought it was a business opportunity, having one dumpster rather than 5 or 6 does help on the space in many of these construction sites. We don't have anybody that we know or aware of that would go through that and separate. I am very familiar with the Green City operation. We did not see that they handled that according to the LEED certification programs. So we have never done it the way they did.
Yeah, they were a little bit, I think, iffy, but I do know that that's what they advertised.
Yeah.
Whether or not they did it well, the fact that they're out of business might tell us a little bit of something.
Yeah, well,
But,
and I'm trying to be considerate of that. We did go down and look at it, and we felt it was completely inappropriate based on the instructions right from the LEED certification program. So,
I got you.
yeah.
I think I really kind of I appreciate this conversation here, and I think that we are seeing some advantages to having a C&D processing facility where there's a building where space just cannot be made for a bunch of different dumpsters. Does this allow that demolition to potentially still qualify for LEED? Maybe. So I think that there's some things to look at, and we can take a look at some of the stakeholders. I think the general contractors is good. Obviously, you have the haulers, and we can talk to the end users. And obviously, I don't know if we want to do it in a roundtable discussion type of a situation, or have one of them come in each of the next 4 to 5 meetings. It's going to be up to you guys on how you want to do that. I think that there's maybe a benefit to a roundtable at some point for us to all learn a little bit more about it and have the experts kind of discussing it. So, so I understand what our next task is as staff. We want to get stakeholders. I have end users. We already have the haulers. I want to get some general contractors, and I'm going to see if I can find an interested party to opening a C&D processing facility and see what that discussion can come out to be. So does that sound like a plan?
It sounds good to me, but I'm only one of many. What do you think, Bruce?
Sorry, I had to get off mute. I would agree. I think it's a good first step. And Brian may be able to offer us some additional contractors, particularly if he has several LEED projects working. that may be able to enlighten us even further. So hopefully they will be opposed to a roundtable, but we could possibly structure our meetings to where if they are not, willing to do a roundtable, then we could split them up and have separate meetings.
I agree.
What do you think, Brian?
Well, the stakeholder group would be the contractors. There's no doubt about that. The one thing that we have noticed, particularly from the BIA, is that costs on projects are really critical to these contractors. And if you started talking about $1,000 loads to process materials, it would be my humble opinion that they're not going to be able to perform that into their bids unless everybody was doing it. We have quite a challenge getting people to do lead. They're either sold out to lead or they're not. We bring that to their attention on most projects that we do, and we probably only have 5 to 10% of those that end up being a lead project, just because of the enormity of the task on site, getting people to separate stuff. People on these, so we all have employees, and people on these sites go to these dumpsters and just throw stuff in. You can't do that. Then they have to take it out and reprocess it into the right dumpster. So we probably have only 5 to 10% that become a lead program.
Actually,
I'm sure we could get them to participate in a roundtable. I'm confident of that.
You brought up a good point, because being an absolute novice to this area, my question was, what is the benefit to any company for being lead?
The benefit that we're aware of, Sandra, is that if they want to have a lead certified project, there are points assigned to each portion of the contractor's responsibility, from building to lights to all those types, electricity, energy, all those things. Solid waste is one of those items, and it's a small item because you can only get up to 2 points in the platinum lead certification program. But we do have, as I say, a small number of contractors that every program they run with us is a lead certified program.
Okay, and why are they better off by being lead certified? What's the benefit to them of being certified?
Usually it's not them, it's the client that wants to have a green building or a lead certified building. So they bid it that way. In other words, it's not the contractor coming to them and saying, we want to build a LEED certified building. It's the owner saying, I am interested in having a green building. And therefore,
which I would think that's a very small percentage.
Based on our knowledge, it is. But we do have them. And those that we do have seem to draw a lot of those clients that want to have green buildings and certified programs. So,
one thing that I would want to add to that discussion is that we're not necessarily, LEED is only one part of what we're looking for.
yeah.
Our goal is diversion. So we want to have as many opportunities out there for people to do that, whether they're wanting to be LEED certified or not.
Anything else on that topic? It looks like the next item on our agenda is the recycling cart grant. Who's going to be talking?
What was the next item?
The recycling cart grant.
Pete, do you want me to talk a little bit about that, or do you want to do it? Karen had to go to teach the ambassador class.
Okay, yeah, we're actually at 3:02. I think this meeting was supposed to last till 3.
It was.
So about the recycling cart grant, let me see if I can just share my screen. So I think the question was how the recycling cart grant would match up with the recommendation, expanded marketing campaign and recycling. So just to kind of give a overview of the recycling cart grant and what's going on there and how it can kind of work together is that, and I'm speaking because I'm not prepared for this, but the recycling cart grant is actually expanding volume and for recycling in the urban services district. The idea that we can kind of use this as a springboard to get some learnings for potential expansion in programs that we develop outside of the USD. And it's all about that education and outreach, how we're trying to get to people. I tell you, Sonia, I would much rather have Karen come back for this at the next meeting. I'm just not.
That sounds like a good idea. Shall we adjourn? Would anybody like to move that we adjourn? It sounds like we're going to have a full agenda next time.
Well, Madam Chair, I apologize if I got us too far into the C&D issue and took up all the time. But I would make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you all. We'll see you next month.
Good conversation. Thank you.
Yeah,
That was excellent. Thank you very much. And Pete?
Mhm.